Let's come to the first video on the Commonwealth heavyweight title history. Used to be the Empire title. For many years it was known as the British Empire title. It was open to any professional boxer living in England, Great Britain, shall I say, or part of the British Empire. In the first such bout, Jim DeScroll, the British featherweight champion, outputted Charlie Griffin of Australia at the National Sporting Club in London in 1908. Fights for the Empire title were few and apart from basically the home countries. It was mainly South Africa, Australia, which took part. But in 1950, a commonwealth committee was formed in London to maintain control of the newly named Commonwealth champions, and consequently there are considerably more of these title fights which have spread to smaller member of countries of the Commonwealth. The rules governing these titles are similar to those that govern British champions. There are 24 countries affiliated with the Commonwealth Committee. This is going back a bit. I know there's 70 now. I think it's 70, 71, 70 something. So yeah, this is a while ago written here. A few of the countries. So let me go straight in, starting from 1910. So 1910. Here's me. 1910, April the 7th, Tommy Burns from Canada, 2 years after losing his title against Jack Johnson on Boxing Day, 26th of December 1908. He lost that to Jack Johnson. Well, they shut off the cameras. Jack Johnson had to chase him around the world to get that title shot. Tommy Burns from Canada. So 1910, April the 7th, Tommy Burns from Canada wins on points over Bill Lang of Australia. He beat him for his world title as well in one of his defences. This was in Sydney, Australia, for the Commonwealth title. In 1910, April the 7th. Then 1911, January 18th, P.O. Nutty Karan wins the disqualification in the first round against Bill Lang from Australia. Another one who fought Tommy Burns in his world title defence series. Then December the 18th, Bombardier Billy Wells wins by KO in the 11th round against Fred Storbeck from South Africa in London, and that was 1911, December the 18th. Bombardier Billy Wells beats Fred Storbeck. Then 1912, December the 6th, Bombardier Billy Wells in 1912, December the 6th, Bombardier Billy Wells wins by KO against George Rodell from South Africa in London, stopping him in the second round by KO. Then we've got 1914, June the 30th, Bombardier Billy Wells wins by KO against Colin Bell of Australia. Bombardier Billy Wells, England, and so was P.O. Nutty Karan from England. So 1914, June the 30th, Bombardier Billy Wells wins by KO against Colin Bell from Australia and London, England. Then 1919, the year Jack Dempsey won his title from Jess Willard in Toledo, Ohio. Yeah, Toledo. Stopping him in the third round, breaking a lot of bones as he went, putting him down 7 times in the first round. Yeah, July the 4th. That was July the 4th, 1919. But this is 1919, February 27th. Joe Beckett from England wins by KO against Bombardier Billy Wells from England in London. Joe Beckett beating Bombardier Billy Wells by a 5 in the 5th round by KO. Then 1920, July the 17th, Joe Beckett from England wins by retirement in the 7th round against Tommy Burns from Canada in London, England. Joe Beckett from England. Then 1922, April the 10th, Joe Beckett from England wins by disqualification against George Cook in the 6th round. George Cook from Australia. This was in London, England. Then 1926, that's when Jack Dempsey lost his title. Lost a title fight to Gene Tunney. But here in 1926, January 27th, Phil Scott from England wins by disqualification in the 7th round against George Cook from Australia in Edinburgh. Then 1926, July the 10th, Phil Scott from England wins on points over 20 rounds against Tom Heaney, who would actually fight Gene Tunney in his last fight, I think it was. Yeah, it was his last fight before he retired for his world title. But here, July the 10th, 1926, Phil Scott wins on points over 20 rounds against Tom Heaney from New Zealand, durable guy. That was in Southampton. Then 1931, June the 13th, Larry Gaines from Canada, cracking old champion. He was a coloured champion, what was called a coloured world champion as well. That was a version of the title, the coloured title actually. But he actually won that. 1931, June 13th, Larry Gaines from Canada wins by KO in the 2nd round against Phil Scott from England in Leicester, England. Then 1932, again the Olympics were in USA then, 1932, January 28th, Larry Gaines from Canada draws with over 15 rounds against Don McCorkindale in South Africa. Again, he knew Freddie Mills quite well, one of the McCorkindales. But anyway, I digress. 1932 here. And that was in London. Larry Gaines draws with Don McCorkindale. Then 1932, March the 3rd, Larry Gaines, Canada, wins on points, this time over Don McCorkindale, over 15 rounds. From South Africa, Don McCorkindale was. Don McCorkindale, yeah, this was in London, England. Larry Gaines from Canada wins on points over Don McCorkindale from South Africa. Then 1933, May the 18th, Larry Gaines from Canada wins on points over George Cook of Australia, 15 rounds point decision in London, England. Larry Gaines was like Sam Langford, a Canadian black man who had to fight for the colour title, unfortunately, due to the sort of like colour bar and racist stuff going on at the time. But I digress. So here we're back to 1934. February 8th, Len Harvey from England wins on points over 15 rounds over Larry Gaines from Canada in London, England. Then 1934, June the 4th, Jack Peterson wins. Jack Peterson from Wales wins by retirement in the 12th round by cut-eye against Len Harvey from England in London, England. And September the 10th, Jack Peterson from Wales wins by retirement in the 3rd round against Larry Gaines from Canada in London, England. 1934, September the 10th, that was Jackie Peterson v Larry Gaines. And then 1934, December the 17th, Jackie Peterson from Wales wins on points over George Cook from Australia in London, England. That was in 1934, December the 17th. 1936, year of the Berlin Olympics. Jesse Owens won the golds. So 1936, January the 29th, Jackie Peterson from Wales wins on points over 15 rounds against Len Harvey from England in London, England. Then 1936, April the 23rd, Jackie Peterson from Wales wins on points over 15 rounds against Jock McAvoy from England in London, England. So, I'm going to go up and adjust. Yeah, so 1936, August the 17th, Ben Ford from South Africa. But he fought for the British titles. There was different rules, etc. then, but yeah, that's what I said earlier. He was South African. He was so he's got him from South Africa here, but he fought for the British title. August the 17th, Ben Ford from South Africa wins. In the third round, referee stops the fight against Jackie Peterson from Wales in Leicester, England. And in 1937, March the 15th, Tommy Farr from Wales, Tony Paddy Wells, wins on points over 15 rounds against Ben Ford from South Africa in London, England. In 1939, March the 10th, Len Harvey from England wins by retirement in the 13th round against Larry Gaines from Canada in London, England. 1944, September the 15th, Jack London from England wins on points over 15 rounds against Freddie Mills from England in Manchester. And then 1945, July the 17th, Bruce Woodcock from England wins by KO in 6 rounds against Jack London in England. In Jack London from England in London, England, that was. In 1949, March 26th, Bruce Woodcock from England wins by KO in the third round against Johnny Ralph from South Africa in Johannesburg, South Africa. Then 1949, June the 2nd, Bruce Woodcock from England wins by KO the 14th round against Freddie Mills from England in London, England. Then 1950, November the 14th, Jack Gardner from England wins by retirement in 11th round against Bruce Woodcock. It's been Uruguay won the World Football Cup this year. So 1950, this was November the 14th, Jack Gardner from England wins by retirement 11th round against Bruce Woodcock from England in London, England. So in 1952, the year of the Helsinki Olympics in Finland. 1952, March the 11th, Johnny Williams from Wales wins on points over 15 rounds against Jack Gardner in England, at London, England. Jack Gardner from England. 1952, October 13th, Johnny Williams from Wales wins by retirement in the 7th round against Johnny Arthur from South Africa in Johannesburg, South Africa. 1952 that was. Then 1953, May the 12th, Don Cockle wins on points over Johnny Williams from Wales. Don Cockle from England. And that was in London, England. 1954, West Germany won the World Football Cup then. 1954, January 30th, Don Cockle from England wins on points over 15 rounds against Johnny Arthur of South Africa, and that was in Johannesburg, South Africa. 1956, the Melbourne Olympics there. And June the 26th, 1956, Joe Graves from Jamaica wins on points over 15 rounds against Kittion Lave. I think that's from Togo. And that was in London, England. Yeah, Melbourne Olympics. Dick McTaggart was at that Olympics. In the amateurs, obviously. 1957. February 19th, 1957, Joe Bygraves from Jamaica wins by KO in the 9th round over Henry Cooper from England, in London, England. Then, 1957, May 27th, Joe Bygraves from Jamaica draws with Dick Richardson from Wales, and that was in Wales, Cardiff. Then 1957, November 25th, Joe Erskine from Wales wins on points over 15 rounds against Joe Bygraves from Jamaica in Leicester, England. Then 1958, the year Brazil won the World Football Cup in Sweden. Uh, 1958, June the 3rd. Brian London from England wins by KO in the 8th round against Joe Erskine from Wales in London. In 1959, January the 12th, 1959, Henry Cooper from England wins on points over Brian London from England, also in London, England. 1959, August the 26th, Henry Cooper from England wins in the 5th round. Referee stops the fight against Gowie de Klerk from South Africa in Porthcawl. So 1959, November the 17th, Henry Cooper from England wins in the 12th round. Referee stops the fight against Joe Erskine from Wales in the 12th round. That was in London, England. 1961, March 21st, Henry Cooper from England wins by retirement on the cut-eye. 5th round retirement against Joe Erskine. And that was in London, England. 1962, the year Brazil won the World Cup in Chile again. Pelé playing. So, April 62, April the 2nd, 1962. Henry Cooper from England wins. Referee stops the fight in the 9th round. Cut eye at Joe Erskine. That was in Nottingham. In 1963, March the 26th, Henry Cooper from England wins by KO in the 5th round against Dick Richardson from Wales. In 1964, the Tokyo Olympics. That's when Joe Fraser won gold for America in the heavyweight division. But here, 1964, February the 24th, Henry Cooper from England wins on points over 15 rounds against Brian London, both from England. That was in Manchester, England. Then 1965, in the year Winston Churchill died. 1965, June the 15th, Henry Cooper from England wins in the 10th round by retirement against Johnny Prescott, both from England. And that was in Birmingham, England. In 1967, June the 13th, 1967, Henry Cooper wins in the 2nd round. Referee stops the fight against Jack Bodell, both from England. That was in Wolverhampton. Then 1967, November the 7th, Henry Cooper from England wins in the 6th round. Referee stops the fight by cut eye against Billy Walker, both from England, in London. London boys there, both of them. So, 1970, Brazil won the World Cup then as well in Mexico, with Pelé playing. So 1970 here with the boxing, March 24th. Henry Cooper from England wins on points over 15 rounds against Jack Bodell in London, both from England. So 1971, so 1971, March the 16th. Like I say, this is 8 days after Ali fought Fraser in the first of 3 fights. But here we are, March the 16th, 1971, March 16th. Joe Bugner wins on points. Hungarian descent, but from England. Joe Bugner wins on points over 15 rounds against Henry Cooper, both from England. That was in London, England. And then 1971, September 27th, Jack Bodell wins on points over 15 rounds against Joe Bugner, both from England, in London, England. Then 1972, the year of the Munich Olympics, and 1972, July 27th, Danny McAlinden from Northern Ireland wins by KO in the second round against Jack Bodell from England. That was in Birmingham, England. And then 1975, January the 13th, Bunny Johnson from England wins by KO in the 9th round against Danny McAlinden from Northern Ireland in London, England. 1975, September the 30th, the Yorkshireman Richard Dunn wins on points over 15 rounds against Bunny Johnson, both from England, in London, England. 1975, November the 4th, Richard Dunn wins by KO. The Yorkshireman from England wins by KO. Richard Dunn over Danny McAlinden from Northern Ireland in London, England. 1976, the year of the Montreal Olympics. 1976 here, October the 12th, Joe Bugner, Hungarian descent from England, wins by KO in the first round against Richard Dunn, the Yorkshireman there from England, and that was in London, England. Then you got 1978, the year Argentina won the Football World Cup. 1978 here, October the 24th, John L. Gardner wins by retirement against Billy Ed, both from England, in London, England. Then 1979, June the 26th, John L. Gardner from England wins in the 6th round. Referee stops the fight against Paul Sykes in London, England. 1981, July the 22nd, Trevor Berbick from Canada wins by KO over Conroy Nelson from Canada. Yeah, he won the Canadian National Championship. He was the first after Chavallo. I think Trevor Berbick, later fight Mike Tyson, etc. So 1981, July the 22nd, Trevor Berbick from Canada wins by KO in the second round over Conroy Nelson from Canada in Halifax, Nova Scotia. That was Sam Langford country there. 1982, when Italy won the World Cup in Spain. Stefano Rossi playing, but again, boxing here. 1982, March the 5th. Trevor Berbick from Canada wins in the 11th round. Referee stops the fight against Gord Rassett from Canada. And that was in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Fought over 12 rounds. But referee stopped the fight. Obviously, Berbick got involved in not a lot of stuff after, and untimely death also. But I'll leave that one there. It's the end of the Commonwealth heavyweight title history. Lovely. From 1910 to 1982. Bang.